Does talking about sexual topics with your kids make you uncomfortable? That's probably true for many of us. We'd rather have an amputation without anesthesia. But is overcoming that discomfort worth it to protect your children? Scientific research shows that for children, the first one to discuss something with them, including sex, becomes the expert in their mind. So as parents, you should always want to be that expert rather than leaving it to their teachers or even their friends. In this series, we will ask, what on earth are kindergarten-age children being taught about sex in 40% of all of our public schools? Why do they need to know about things like consent and gender identity? Also, does your fifth grader know more about sex than you do as an adult? What's the rationale for teaching those at grade school and kindergarten level about sexual consent, gender identity, and healthy relationships? Remember, much of what 40% of our public schools are teaching our children directly contradicts what God has said in the Bible. And because most parents don't know where to turn for help, I've invited 3 guests to talk about understanding God's design for gender, sex, marriage, and family, and teaching your kids to treat those who hold different beliefs with gentle, Christ-like compassion without compromising biblical values. My guests today are Hillary Morgan Ferrer, who has a master's degree in biology and specializes in scientific apologetics, Amy Davison, a former Air Force veteran turned writer who holds a Bachelor of Science degree in religion from Liberty University and an MA in Christian apologetics from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, and Lindsay Mendenwalt, who has a master's degree in ethics and apologetics from Denver Seminary, a master's degree in public administration, plus an earned law degree, and is an adjunct professor at Northwestern College in Iowa. Join us for this edition of the John Ankerberg Show. Welcome to our program. We've got 3 guests, as you've already heard, and Hillary, Amy, and Lindsay are ready to go. But I'm John Ankerberg, and our topic today is queer theory, or gender queer theory. What is it, and how come it is an explosive ideology? It might be the most powerful one of all the things that we're talking about, and it'll have an impact on our society and also the Christian church. I want you to understand this one, so it's very important that you listen. Hillary, here's the thing. Tell me, as you were growing up, how you developed and the personality that you developed, and the fact is if you had been doing that now, you might have turned into having a queer gender identity now. Yeah. You don't, but tell us how you grew up and what your personality was through the stages of growing up.
So I started out, I remember seeing the little princess outfits and thinking that was fun, but there was a point in time where you could not wrestle me into a dress no matter how hard you tried. And I just tried to, as I got into middle school and really more high school, I started wanting to get away from anything that was feminine, because in my mind, from watching a lot of the movies, being feminine meant you were irrational, weak. You were weak, and that you were stupid in a lot of ways. I can't count the number of times where they show, and they still do this, the strong woman isn't strong, she's just loud and makes really loud, bad decisions. Yeah. And so I said, I don't want anything to do with that. I am so not that I was always wearing flannel, I was wearing Birkenstocks and, Tevas and jeans, and I didn't want to be in anything that would identify me with all these giggling girls. And I think also part of it was, and basically all the mama bears on our team have this experience as well, that there's this girl rule book that has a lot of rules that somehow I just missed out on, and things you're supposed to say and not supposed to say, and ways you're supposed to empathize or not empathize. And I was very matter of fact. I was very tell it like it is. I could have conversations with guys so much easier. To this day, I feel more comfortable in a room full of men because there's not all these rules that I have to follow along. I had to learn feminine language as if it were a foreign language, to know what I was supposed to do and what not to do. And it wasn't until my 20s that I realized I get along better with guys, and I get along better with other girls who get along with guys, which is kind of what our Mama Bear team is. We've all felt a little off with women's ministry, like we didn't quite fit in.
What was interesting is you said that you love to play football with the guys to show them you could knock them over.
Oh, yes.
And you loved roughhousing with them. You kind of hated the picture of what a woman was, and you gravitated toward what a picture of a guy was. And the guys seemed have in their conversations to be the thinkers.
Yes.
They were the intellects, and you didn't hear that so much from the girls. That wasn't there. They were always talking about gossip and guys and all this kind of stuff. And you just said, I don't like that, I like this. And you are very smart intellectual, and so you gravitated toward the other people, which were always seems to be guys. And your grandma, I loved her. She said, she's just different. And
She marches to the beat of her own drum. She said that
Yeah.
to my mom many times.
yeah, and the fact is, you did go against everything else, and you thought you'd rather be a guy than to be a girl. So this is all the way up into your 20s. And so you had a pretty good head of steam going into your 20s with that thought in mind. But what happened that changed it?
Yeah, so I would say that when I met my husband, I had a really interesting experience. I would say one of the reasons why I still came out with a healthy gender, number one, is because I'm 5'1", and at the time was maybe about 90 pounds, so I didn't look anything like a guy, so I couldn't even pretend there. I had a very, very strong relationship with my father, and he always dignified those aspects in me. And so probably that relationship with him is why I just gravitated towards guys in general, because we could talk versus I had a hard time talking with the girls. But when I met my husband, it was really interesting that right after we'd had the DTR, which is kind of defining the relationship, I was home sick for 2 weeks from work. And you know, all the overthinkers anonymous, overthinkers of America know that if you're in the beginning parts of those relationships and you're by yourself, that's all you can think about, trying to figure everything out. I have to put all my puzzle pieces together to know exactly what fits where before I can calm down and my brain can calm down. So at one point I sent him this really long email of, I need to know exactly where this is heading.
Pages and pages and pages.
Oh my gosh, my mom was like, tell him you take it back, that you were sick. He sent me back like 2 sentences that said, I've already told you where I stand, God's got this. And I remember just sitting in that response, and I started crying. It wasn't just a little cry, and I've never really been a crier. I am now.
You didn't like crying.
Oh yeah, no.
You had not cried up till you're 20.
Nope, very, very little. And I cried so hard, and it was because I had this picture. It was this really random picture that I got in my head of a woman who had been bound and gagged, that had been inside of me, who was finally being released. And it's almost like I didn't even know there was this feminine aspect of me that I had completely just suppressed until I met my husband, where it was finally safe for her to come out. And I would say, like, John's had fun watching me grow into my femininity as I've gotten girlier and girlier and girlier since we've been married, but I never had to change any of those real core aspects of myself. I just realized I can be a girl, I can be feminine, and I can have these aspects. But I didn't feel safe with that until I met my husband. And I know that I've talked to other women that kind of have a similar story, that even though they didn't have like such a, a moment where they saw it in their head, they're like, oh yeah, I've gotten a lot girlier since being married. And
What does it mean to be girlier?
well, I mean, I like pink now. You could not pay me to wear pink back in the day.
I wear makeup.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's kind of a newer thing.
Yeah.
I dabbled in it a little in college because I joined a sorority, which was wild for a woman who isn't really that strongly of a woman, but that's kind of girly makeup.
I did hair and makeup. That was the one girly thing that I did. I'd say kind of being more into cooking and babies. Like I always say, be careful what you make fun of, because God will turn you into that. So I always made fun of the girls who cried at movies, who cried at weddings, who cried at babies. Right. I cry at everything now. If I really strongly feel the Holy Spirit there, man, it's just tears all over. So my husband John says that we got married and I started crying, and I haven't stopped crying since.
Now, let's go into queer theory, and this is being taught as one of the gender identities that girls can take for themselves. And you would have been a prime candidate for that. Tell us why, and tell us why this is so explosive, because it's not only including that, but it's including other theories as well.
So the concept of being queer, it just means that you don't fit into the norm. And so like you had asked me before, like, can you define queer theory? And I laughed. I said, I don't think queer theorists can define queer theory, because it's literally defined by what it's against, not what it's for. And what it's against is anything that would be considered normal. So when it comes to gender, as Amy was talking about in one of the previous episodes, that gender, the norms for gender are stereotypes. This is what's stereotypically female, this is what's stereotypically masculine. And if you don't fit in with either of those, then you're queer, or you're non-binary, or it's just any number of I am statements. I would say if we have like a virus that's going through our schools right now, it is taking on I am statements, which are really, really powerful statements. In order to define yourself other than being a child of Christ or a man or a woman. So queer theory is going to buck against any norm. It'll start with gender stereotypes. For example, when I was studying for this chapter, one of the guys at the library checking me out had painted fingernails. And I think he saw me just look down. He said, oh, we had to do that for an assignment in school where we had to pick one gender non-conforming action and do it for a whole week.
Yeah.
And that was part of their assignment. So they're actively looking for things that defy the norm. Once you start defying the norm, you're going to go beyond a girl who likes sports or a guy who likes doing art and dance and stuff. You can get really far away from the norm. As like what we were talking about, you can start identifying with animals, you can start identifying with elves and fairies. And
yeah, let's stop there for a minute. We've got
Yeah.
LGBTQ plus, all right? And the fact is, define those words and then get me into animals.
Yeah. So LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, these are all sexualities.
That you can choose to say, this is what I am. This is my
These
gender
are your I am
identity.
statements. And then T is the transgender, which is an umbrella statement for anything other than being the gender of your biological sex. And then there's the plus, where it can be you're queer, you're questioning, you're asexual, you're non-binary, all these different things. And so anything that's just contra to the norm is now kind of umbrellaed under that, and we're trying to encourage kids to explore all these different identities so they can know who their authentic self is.
And the rules are that, you know, you're talking about these are I am statements.
Yes.
God says he's the great I am. So really, the I am statements are really these people saying, you know, this is a God-like statement I'm making about myself. And the law is saying if a person says this is what they are, then you can't change it, and you shouldn't make fun of them. So the laws are coming in here and saying whatever they choose to be, but the list is growing longer. Like I said, Medicine Net says there's 72 ideas like this. Now, where do animals come in? Because I saw, you know, people were saying they were like little squirrels, and what other things are they saying?
Yeah, so identifying as different animals. Everybody's kind of heard these, you know, things about kids identify as cats in school. We've got videos, and our friend Katie Fost, who lives up in the Seattle area, her children will ask, Mommy, why is that man pulling that other man on the ground with a leash? Because there'll be guys dressed up as dogs, or you have people that are identifying, and this is actually a big movement as well, identifying as infants. Well, you'll have grown adults wearing diapers, living in giant cribs because they're identifying as a child. They may have a job in IT during the day, but they come home and put on their custom-made jumbo diapers.
Yeah, let's talk about this thing of reality, and let's talk about what is fantasy in our mind versus what is reality in our body in terms of our gender.
Yeah, so what have y'all noticed in terms of what's happened with the interplay with fantasy and reality?
Yeah, Amy, tell me, you know, you're the scholar here, so tell me a little bit about the difference between those two. The fact is you can think in your mind something, 72 different things, and if what you think in your mind is what you want to say that you are, it doesn't matter what your sexual gender is, whether you got a vagina or you got a penis. The fact is that doesn't matter.
No.
You can say you're something else, and somebody else can't say anything about you that's wrong.
Yeah, it's kind of this repackaging of ancient Gnosticism, to where the Gnostics loved to sort of degrade the body but elevated the spiritual, and we're seeing that within LGBTQ ideology and queer theory. It elevates these sort of mental constructs of who we think we are, with this undergirding of, well, we have to get out from underneath oppression. And oppression is often packaged as the most ultimate oppressive thing is the biblical worldview regarding sexuality, especially God's distinction between male and female, his design for marriage and sex and relationships. And so what queer theory does is it says, no, we're going to liberate people from this construct. But what they don't realize is that queer theory ultimately degrades every individual involved with it, with this false advertisement of this is what freedom is, this is living out your true self. And it does, it attacks the body and says the body is now a stumbling block to who you are. And if you just gave in to the thoughts of your mind, well, then you would be free. You wouldn't be practicing self-harm, you would be healthier, less depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. And statistically speaking, this is completely false.
Yeah, queer theory, one of the things that's so insidious is that there's a lot of anxiety in our culture, especially among our youth. And this idea that you're experiencing this anxiety and this depression because you're in the wrong body. And if people really cared about you, they would care about liberating you. And we have the solution for all these feelings of angst. Who here had angst when they were going through puberty? Raise your hand. Everybody had angst going through puberty. So if you're being told,
Because you're trying to figure out who you are.
yeah, you're trying to figure out who you are. If you're being promised, I can free you from all that anxiety, man, you'll take whatever it is.
But that's not happening.
That's not.
No.
It's getting worse.
Their anxiety is not disappearing when they start
Yeah,
conforming
Lindsay,
to other
here's
feelings.
the thing I want to ask you, because you're teaching college students. Are you seeing this already something that they're fighting?
Yes. I teach at 2 different colleges right now. I teach at a private Christian liberal arts school, and I also teach at a secular university. And I see it particularly in my secular students. This is something that they're grappling with. It's something they're hearing not just in the classroom, they're hearing it outside in culture. Culture is telling them mixed messages about who they should be or how they should conform to what they see on television and in media. My students in my Christian liberal arts school have questions. They want to know things. Thankfully, I can share Christ with them every day in the classroom. And that biblical worldview is such an important foundation that parents need to be giving their kids every single day until they leave their home. They
Okay.
need to remind them about where their identity is found.
This might be for you, but everybody's open to jump in on this one, and that is, why is this going to be a threat, queer theory, to the church?
Well, because the church is seen as one of the ultimate oppressors. That if you look at down, if you Google matrix of oppression, or you just look at intersectionality, and you look at, they're defining people by who are the oppressors and who are the oppressed.
It's come down to this. The fact is, we've got who's oppressing those that stand against you saying that you're a squirrel, or you're saying that you are a guy who wants to dress up as something else. And if you say that, and that's what you believe, and if the church is saying, hey, you're wrong, then the church has got a problem. Why?
The church has got a problem because this is a war of 2 worldviews. And so you cannot ascribe to both at the exact same time. And so what we've been seeing within churches is that churches are having to, as one Methodist preacher said, she goes, I had to choose between whether or not I was going to affirm doctrine or affirm people, and I choose people. And so there was a split within the Methodist Church because she and many others have decided to go along with LGBTQ and queer theory to believe that one's identity is not made in the image of God, but one's as a mental construct that they create. And so they have separated, and what she didn't realize is that when we choose the affirmation of people over the truth of God, you lose both of them, because now you become an active Pied Piper, so to speak, to a false worldview. And that's what we're seeing so many churches cave to, is their empathy is being exploited to the extent that they reject the truth of God to affirm the feelings of an individual. And our feelings are real, but they're not always true.
Well said. Is this why we need to talk to our young kids that are in Christian homes early, starting even before kindergarten?
Yes, and in fact, Amy has a really good thing that we talk about, the difference between teaching a Christian worldview and teaching from a Christian worldview, that we can know the facts of the Christian worldview, but knowing how they integrate into everything. Because what's happening is kids may not being taught this is queer theory, but they're being discipled into queer theory to basically accept all these assumptions not realizing that that is the worldview that they're affirming. And so
And then when we even look at scripture, we can actually debunk gender theory simply by looking within the range of masculinity and femininity depicted within scripture. So with our children, we want to show that, yes, he killed Goliath. Yes, he was a man, but he was also a man when he was playing the harp and hanging out with sheep.
And he
just
cried,
crying a lot. He cries a lot.
And writing songs. I mean, these are not typically like very manly things. And women as well. Yes, we have the Marthas who are absolutely wonderful, but we also had the Deborahs and the Jaels who were brave and bold in the faith and fearless before conflict. And that is just as much.
You got the kids. The fact is, you have a certain parent sex talk even before they go to kindergarten. You're not telling them all the things that we're talking about right now. So this sex talk has got to continue all through the grades because the curriculum is going to get tougher. They're going to know more sex at 5th grade than their parents do. Okay, so the parents have got to figure out what's going on in the society, and they've got to be able to understand how they're going to answer their own kids and stick with them. And this talk goes on all the way through to high school. Goodness, if she's in a Christian home and she's feeling these things and she is 22 and she hasn't figured it out, I'm just saying our kids are going to be in that same boat even more because she didn't have the curriculum. Your kids have got the curriculum now being taught in the schools. Not all schools. We got private schools. We've got school choices. So those guys can fight it, but they're going to have to fight this thing. Give me some last seconds of information, advice to parents that are watching right now of what they can do to protect their own children.
Yep, so first off, I would say personality, interests, and aptitudes are on a spectrum, but gender is not. And you need to repeat that to your kids until they want to gag. And whenever you have a child, that if they are displaying things that might be gender atypical, if you have a boy who loves to do ballet, you say, you know what, I am so glad that you're a boy who loves doing ballet because you are going to bring something to that dance that no girl ever will, and your wife will love you for it. Or if you have a girl who really likes boy-specific things, you say, you know what, I am so glad that you're a girl who likes, tinkering with old cars, and you're going to bring something to that no guy ever will, and your husband will love you for that. And so you're affirming them not only as their biological gender, you're affirming how God has actually made them with their interests, personality, and aptitudes. And you're affirming their sexuality in the sense that neither of those things are going to prevent you from living in a biblical marriage the way God designed you.
All right, you folks that are watching, I think that these guys are so smart that half of this went right over your head. That's why I'm offering their book. It says, Mama Bear Apologetics. The mama bear are the mamas. If you're in the woods and you come across a cub and the mama bear is 20 feet in back of her, you don't even want to go toward that cub, because if the mama bear thinks that you're a danger, that mama bear is going to come rushing over and you're dead. Now, Mama Bear Apologetics assumes that you want to protect your little ones that are coming up. And it's written for the mothers and the fathers that have the time that'll get involved with this. And it'll explain all the things that we're talking about. And next week, we're going to talk about 10 sexual crosses that some of our young people have to pick up and carry for Christ. Let's say that you're 20 years old, you're a good-looking stud guy, and the fact is there's a bunch of women out there that are non-Christians that are saying, hey, I'll show you a lot, I will kiss you, I'll do sex with you, just, let's spend some time together. And all of the different temptations that are out there, what does that kid do if he's a Christian and wants to stay pure for Christ? We got 10 different persons that we're going to talk about, and maybe you're one of them. And we're going to talk about the girls as well. So please join us next week. But listen, I've got a personal word for you, so stick with me, and I'll talk to you in just a moment.